Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am particularly excited about today's lesson because I haven't done one of these in a while. It's where I take a finished sketch, as you can see here, and I'll walk you through the sketch here in a couple minutes, and then I explain to you how I achieved all of the layering and texturing details, etc., how long it took, and then what steps you can take to achieve something like this. Now, I want to give some background on what this creature is. I have a personal project called Ecor 117, which is a fictitious planet. It's a personal project of mine I've been working on for a while. This creature's part of it. It's called a carphanoid. And I'll just kind of run the sketchbook up here so you can see it from head to toe. It's a very tall creature. There's a human there. Just a typical 6-foot warrior. Or 5 foot, I don't know. Just a human being. And it's pretty big. Okay, you could probably even say this thing might belong in the same dimension as the creatures in the mist. But with that said, I'm going to show you how I achieved all of these stretched skin technique, the stripes, and all of that. Now, when you do a drawing like this, it does not start off directly in detail, which I think is an Achilles heel for a lot of artists that are wanting to learn how to draw, because we have these images in our head of what the creature or character is supposed to look like, or they want it to look like, but they completely bypass the foundation laid for that drawing in order to achieve it. With this particular critter, I started with the head up here. Now, I didn't have an idea of what I wanted this to look like. Oh, by the way, just some of you claim that I cheat by tracing. No, there's no tracing back here. See, there's a weird little critter right there that looks like an egg sac, and then there's a dude with a raven helmet on. I don't know, just for practice. All right. So anyway, getting back to this, here's how I would start the sketch if I were to want to do something different. I'm going to go down here. Because I have all of this graphite here, I am very particular about how careful I am not to smear stuff. I'm going to reach behind my camera here, and I'm just going to get a white piece of paper, okay, because when I drew this, I made sure not to rub my hand across the actual graphite, especially when I started to layer everything up and make it look really pretty. Okay, so this is what I do sometimes. I'll just take a printer paper and then I can rest my palm right on it, and then I'll just move it however I need to do, and then it keeps, all my hand oils away and stuff. All right, so here's what I would do. First, a very, very light outline. And I think what I'm going to do is just maybe an alternate head or a face. And I want to make sure that everything is in focus. Once I have this rough, very gestural light outline done, I'm then going to move on with putting in just an outline for maybe the mandibles, maybe some weird things that are growing off the head. But you can see here that I'm keeping everything very, very light. Now, whenever I do these long, detailed sketches, as this illustration over here, I tend to do it in about maybe 6 to 10 hours. Never in one sitting though, because I cannot sit for more than like 30 minutes tops working on something that long. I just can't do it. Okay, so once I have this in here and I'm starting to form the head, I like to think about structure and about how appendages grow from the head and the skull or whatever it's made of. Now, I can already hear in my head what the comments are going to be. Am I looking at reference? Am I thinking about critters and stuff? No, I am not looking at reference. However, I have obsessed about animals all my life, so I'm combining the knowledge that I have, and I'm just making up some shapes as I go, but I can also kind of break the rules a little bit, which is it's a fun thing to be able to do, but I am also constantly looking at reference whenever I have to learn new techniques about, a client's wants. Sometimes they want a beast that I've never drawn before. And in that case, you know, if it's mixing a squirrel and a bear together, okay, I know what those roughly look like, but I would still have to look at some reference. Now here, I'm just pulling knowledge from all the insects that I've drawn before. That's my specialty. I mix very creepily mammalian, human, and insect, crustacean DNA, genes, whatever you want to call it, all in one. And it offers some really, really scary, otherworldly, you know, Lovecraftian things, which is fun, right? All right, so once I'm starting to get this head in here, you'll see that these long appendages are kind of growing out from the mouth, similar to what I did for the carphanoid's upper lip. Okay, so this thing right here, these are, I guess you can call them a proboscis, but it's not really a proboscis, similar to what you see on a mosquito or whatever, especially down here. You know, if this thing wants to dip down and try to sense where the foliage is and food source and such, because this thing is blind. All right, so maybe this thing is going to be blind too. I want to acknowledge that. And one of the happy accidents that I had when I was drawing this creature are these big bulbous shapes coming off the side of the head. I immediately started thinking, what if this is like an extra sensory organ? Similar to how sharks and dolphins have echolocation, you know, like the organ within their bodies. What if this creature had something similar to where it can hear but not see, and it can sense where everything was? I think what I'm going to do now is actually give it some form of long tongue, just to be fun. But it's not going to be your typical tongue. So I'm not just going to round it off as expected. I might put like a split at the end of it. Okay, so I don't want to be predictable with this. And that's one of the things that I made sure not to do with this creature. I didn't want to be predictable. So one of the ways that I encourage aspiring concept artists to not be predictable is look at joints, look at hands, and look at like the mouth and places where we normalize how we view animals. Okay, so for example, if we see a dog mouth, we also think about bear, we think about wolverines, we think about you know, pretty much foxes, even anything that can eat meat, and they all have canines. Well, what if your creature didn't have that, but it still ate meat? How would it chew? Okay, that's kind of the things that I like to think about whenever I'm doing creatures. So this little slit in the mouth here with this crazy proboscis tongue thing coming out, what if that's how it grabs food and then it just sucks it back into the head? So that'd be kind of cool. The carphanoid up here has a pretty powerful jaw, pretty strong, jagged jaw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this one a slightly softer touch to the jaw. However, I'm still going to make it deadly in a sense that if this creature brings in a food source by hooking it with this tongue, there are these razor sharp chin spikes that are going to help the food, or help the creature keep the food near its mouth. And I think what else it needs is maybe some very small teeth-like appendages around that opening so that it can grab it, and then the poor sucker will not be able to escape. Sucker as an animal or a human if it decides to hunt it. Okay, so I also don't want to keep this head just oval shaped and then have a skinny neck. I want it to have a pretty powerful neck. You look up here, the carphanoid, so you have the deltoid muscles, deltoids. Right where the bicep would be located, there's this really long membrane that's attached literally to where the earlobe would be. Okay, and what if this creature had something similar? So notice how, if you're following along with me from the beginning, I still have not shaded anything because I want the outline to be there, and I'll show you the technique that I'm going to use in a minute. But I can tell you, once I get the outline in, I just take my pencil and I do a very, very light coating of shading across the entire thing, including the line work. And then what I do after I do the shading, which is a minimum of 3 different passes, then I start figuring out where the darker areas are going to be immediately. Because I can always add shading around the darker areas and just build up, you know, the graphite, because you can always go darker, you can't go lighter. So I immediately want to establish where the dark areas are first. Like for example, in the mouth region, I already know that's going to be dark because it's the inside of the mouth. There's no, but I'm not shading yet. I'm not beginning that process, but I already know the mouth is, because almost all mouths are dark because there's no light getting in them. So that's what that is. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to put some skin, maybe stretch down here, and then maybe the neck. It's kind of like a strange worm. I don't want it to get in the way of my original drawing. Okay, add some thickness to it. Maybe the shoulder is down here. It's kind of like a weird slug, huh? And then I think I know what I want to do already up here. I want to put in some pretty deadly hooks. And the reason I want to do the hooks is I want to give a purpose for those appendages. I don't want to just have them dangling above the head. I want those things to have a use. So now imagine if this thing is hunting, or if it needs food source like fruit, whatever it eats, it can hook the prey, drag the prey closer to its mouth, then the proboscis comes out, and then it pulls all of it into the mouth, and then it definitely cannot escape because it has these hooked or spiked chin parts. I don't have any anatomical reference for this yet, so I'm just making up parts. It's the dangling thing that has sharp parts. You're going to hear that throughout the video. Okay, now I think I'm ready to put on a coating. So here's what I do. I'm using a 4B pencil just because I personally like 4B, and then I'm just going to lightly put in a coating. So I'm going to go this direction first. Right like that. Now notice how there's still gaps in the strokes. That's okay. But one thing that I am keeping track of is that I go in one single direction the first pass from start to finish. I don't switch it around. I keep it. I want to keep it unified, even up the little appendages, the little arms with the hooks at the end. Then after I get that first pass, now I'm going to turn it. All right, so I'm going to turn right like that, and I'm going to get another direction. And because I have more graphite down here and deliberate mist that I sketched in, I'm going to use my piece of paper so I don't smear anything. And then I'm just going to go in a different direction. I'm going to carefully hold my pencil in the direction that I want to go, and I'm going to keep my strokes close together. That's another shading tip. Those of you that are new to my channel that haven't seen my previous lessons, which I encourage you to do. Okay, when you start shading and you don't push harder, you just do it lightly first, your ability to build up graphite is like much more increased. Okay, pass number 3. And this is minimum. Now, with me personally, I'm never satisfied with 3. But for people first starting out learning how to shade, 3 is a good way to start. I'm just carefully laying it in now, but I'm going in this angle regardless of where it is on that head. So I'm just going to push it up like this. I'm going to go all the way to the end of the head. All right, and even across the small arms where I might be going outside of the lines, that's okay. Because the outline that I gave the creature's head, that's already there to establish where the body is. So you don't have to worry about going outside of the lines. Once you're comfortable with at least 3 different passes, I personally, I'm just going to do one more. So I'm just going to flip my sketchbook upside down, or almost upside down. Okay, and then I'm going to go in this angle. So the great thing about having a sketch on the edge of the page, the pager, blah, that's a blooper, I'm leaving that in. The great thing about having a drawing on the edge is that your hand can just rest off of the entire sketchbook. So you can just comfortably add in more markings and you're good. Okay, so I see that I have a similar direction there and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to turn it like this and I'm just going to hit it with one more direction. Turn my hand slightly. There we go. So when I turn this back to the normal position, oops, it's stuck on my desk. Okay, so once I have that in the normal position, look how at least decent that looks for a covering. So it's very, very light. I didn't get darker anywhere. What I do want to do is start to add a little bit a darker treatment of the graphite on the actual face. And the reason that is because I want to draw attention to that area. So I'm being a little bit more careful about how I'm applying the strokes now. I'm going back and forth very lightly. It's naturally getting darker anyway when you do this, but now this is now the fourth pass. And you're gonna start to see a really nice effect happening. It's like a light wash of watercolor almost, but with graphite. And then I'm just going to start switching positions again with my hand because it's in such a small area. I don't have to twist the sketchbook around for small areas. And once I start doing that, I'm getting pretty happy with the area around the mouth. Small strokes now. But notice that I'm only concentrating on the head. So this is exactly what I did up here for the Carfinoid's body. And I want to duplicate that as I move down here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually darken those chin spikes. And I'm going to start dark, I'm going to push harder, and then I'm going to gradually release the pressure as I move up the chin. And here's the great thing. This is why I really stress layering your graphite in 3 to 4 to 5 different passes to have that nice coating, is because whenever you start to add in details around it or on it, any of the gaps that you have not filled with that detail, it's already taken care of because of the shading that you had previously laid down. This is why it's so crucial to layer your drawings instead of just like hitting the ground running and starting blindly with details, because then you have to worry about it, you know, picking up the background color of your paper. With me, I'm using moleskin, which offers like a really cool old school parchment paper look, you know, like old pirate maps and stuff. So it adds like that pale creamy color. But with white paper, I mean, if you're going to do the same type of sketch but on printer paper, you have to be even more careful because there's no tone on white paper. It's literally stark white. You can't get any more vibrant than that. So if you miss the gaps in your shading, you probably will have to do 6, 7, 8 different passes. And like I said, that's what prompted me to, you know, get the patience to actually do 10 to 15 different passes. This entire sketch right here, I think I mentioned in the beginning, it took a good 8 to 10 hours. Like it was there, but it wasn't in one sitting. I just had to, constantly go back and rethink about what I was doing. Okay, so not to go down a rabbit hole on that. I haven't started on the appendages yet, but there's a nice coating happening and a nice gradient happening with the graphite moving up. Now I'm to the point where there are no gaps left over from the strokes that I had put in for the shading. Because this right now with the teeth, the jaw, the original tone that I put down there, all of that, it's really starting to layer up. I'm caking on the graphite, which is good. That's what I want. And now I'm just thinking about places that I know I'm going to want dark. All right, so for example, in here where the tongue is, I'm going to give a slightly darker outline, and I'm just going to move to a lighter touch as I move down that proboscis. You know what? No, I'm not going to call that a proboscis. It's coming straight out of the mouth. as a tongue. So I'm just going to keep it as a tongue. I do know that this part of the tongue that I had outlined is also going to be a little darker due to the cast shadow from the mouth. Because I'm imagining that this thing is just lit from above. So there's a little arrow, so the light source is here, but it's a very soft ambient light. I personally like sketching in soft, dimly lit light, just so the darks and the lights kind of dance together. That's the only way that I can put it. Harsh shadows are great if something's in spotlight, but I don't like drawing too much attention to specific areas more than I have to. And when you do something in a spotlight, you're forced to. All right, so, and I mean, drawing stuff in a spotlight and harsh shadows, it's amazing. It's so much fun. And I do it. I just, like, for my creatures, I typically don't. Not unless a client asks me to. So now I'm pretty happy with this mouth. I'm just adding details around it. It's a very strange mouth. Now that I look at it, it kind of looks like a camel spider. I didn't even try to do that. Camel spiders are disgusting, man, but they're amazing at the same time. Okay, again, here comes another pass. I'm moving up. By this time, it's super smooth. So you're going to start to see the gradient happening. It's dark, it's medium, and then it gets lighter up here. Now, I will say, I'm pretty convinced, I've convinced myself, that these hooks up here are also going to be dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the tip of the claw, which is what I was doing here at the chin. So you notice the carphanoid, the chin, right there. It's dark, and then it moves lighter as it goes down the jaw. At the end of these antennae, they go dark, and it moves lighter. I put in some misty effects to make it look like the atmosphere is kind of overtaking the creature, or it's physically moving through it. Anytime that I start, same thing up here with these shoulder spikes. I started dark at the tip, and then I moved lighter down. If you do that, it's a really fun technique to accentuate spikes, scales, pretty tentacles, even if they're closer to you. Pretty much anything coming at the viewer. This is what's really going to help establish depth when you do something like this, because at the end of the day, we all want our drawings to look and feel alive. Okay, and there's a lot to be said about your line gestures, like the movement of your sketch, but also you want it to look like it's living and breathing. So the gradient, the lighting, because lighting will kill a good design. I see it in 3D all the time. I'm guilty of it. I've had some pretty good creatures in my day designed, and then when I try to light it, it just looks like crap. And I just kind of don't know what to do after that. Okay, so once I have this, I'm just going to establish some structure on this side of the mouth as I wrap around, which is another thing that I want to stress to you guys is when you start to draw your creations and make it look 3D by adding in the shading and the values and everything, you want to establish that there's structure on the other side of that face. Just look up here at the carphanoid. So I have this chin spike right here, and then I have the other one, but it's ever so slightly lighter. Over here I have the other side of the face. It's ever so slightly lighter because I want to give the illusion that there is a body on that side also, and it's living and breathing in the environment even though it's on a 2D plane. Alright, so once I have this, this is the amount of work that I put in just to establish the gradients first. This is without detail, and I'll show you how to put on detail soon. I can't wait for that. So once I got that atmospheric perspective in there, I then can start to think about, okay, what are the body parts that I really want to come out? Now, I do like that bulbous organ that's on the side of this creature's head. What if I have something similar but not the exact same thing? So I'm just going to add in an oval here. And I think I just immediately started sketching the head of a wasp. Oh man, I didn't mean to do that. But we'll see how it happens. We'll see what happens. Maybe we can change it. You know what might change it? I'm gonna put like a strange appendage coming off of that eyeball or that organ. So then it might not look like an eye. Or it might, and there could be an organ off of the eye. Happy accidents, guys. You are literally witnessing this in real time. I did not plan for any of this to happen, but I'm just going to kind of go with it. The other thing that I want to start to establish now is what the heck is happening with these joints on the strange hook arms coming from the head. So I think this part down here is the major shoulder joint, I guess you can call it. I don't think a shoulder is on the face, but let's just say that there needs to be a cluster of muscles down here with tendons. Okay, now this is where you can kind of break some rules as long as you make it look believable. Okay, so like you have your tendons attaching to specific joints up here, similar to a forearm, similar to your ulna, and then maybe a thick part down here, and then you have your crazy hook. Okay, so I'm just gonna start dark here at the hook, which I meant to do 10 minutes ago, and then I'll just slightly walk up some value and then start dark and immediately go light as I go down that arm. So again, why did I start dark and I went down lightly with the graphite? What I was talking about before with if it's closest to you, just darken it a tad and then lighten it as it goes back, because it creates atmospheric perspective, and it also it has that illusion of depth, and we all want to achieve depth in the things that we draw. Also, lawn care's here, so I might have to stop this for a while. I'm not sure yet. I probably will. So I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, so once I establish that the darkness right here where the hook is, the other part that I know that I want to make a little darker on the arm to show that depth is the secondary joint, or the, I guess you can call it the bicep part of that appendage. So here's the forearm, here's the bicep. Now why would I be putting it on the bicep? Because if this thing is lit from above, then this forearm is going to cast a shadow on that part. This is another easily forgotten thing when it comes to creating depth in your drawings and creating realism. Okay, the cast shadows are majorly important because it lets us know where things are in space. So I'm just going to start applying a slightly heavier set or a heavier coating of graphite here. And then I'm going to get dark right there in the joint and then move lighter as I come down. The reason I'm going lighter as I come down is because the shadow is diffused, and again, the light source is ambient, so it's diffused throughout. Okay, now that I have that established, pretty happy with that, that's fine. There are other areas that I'm just going to have to pay attention to with that. For example, this bulbous area, the shoulder joint, wherever it starts to wrap underneath, that's going to be darker for that shoulder joint. Why is that? Is because if it's lit from above, think about less light penetrating underneath that round area. Same thing with out here. Now, another thing to help you create realistic drawings when you put shading on is pay attention to your edges and how value is coming off of the edge. Okay, so if I put in value on that far right arm and then I move up, so this entire arm is going to be lighter because it's in the distance, similar to this, you know, this proboscis right here, this crazy thing coming off its head. I'm going to want to do the same thing. Once I start putting in the darker area around this shoulder joint, and out here where I start to darken the edges like I was talking about, it's going to start to bring a more realistic light source effect to it. So what that means is think about a sphere and then think about the core shadow that runs around a sphere or a cylinder or pretty much anything rounded. The core shadow will sit towards the edge of the shape because that is the area where the least amount of light is touching as it wraps around the other side. And then of course you have bounce light, which is bouncing off of different objects, you know, like the atmosphere, the ground, trees, rocks, or whatever. So once I establish the darkness around there, you can see that it almost feels more complete since I just added that little detail and that's it. I'm not going into any fancy hair or skin or wrinkles, scales, etc. It's just a matter of darkening that part. Now, look at these two shoulder joints. This one is going to have to be slightly darker, or this one is going to just have more detail in it, while this one stays the same. The thing is, when we start to put a lot of detail in a sketch like this, and a sketch like this over here, you have to pick, well, you have to choose your battles. Okay, so for example, the bicep, tricep, and shoulder area over here is obviously the focal point with the head, but over here, notice how much lighter the inside of this bicep area is, and this arm right there. Because of that, look what I was able to do with the throat. The throat is actually coming at us. How is that possible? It's depth, it's atmospheric perspective. I applied more value to that gullet area than I did to that shoulder area on the other side of the form being the creature. What this does is it brings in atmospheric perspective, and it shows that this thing, even though it's drawn on a 2D plane, it still feels like it's living and walking wherever it is. You want to do the same thing with any sketch that you are working on. So for this, I think what I'm going to do is I like the details that I put up here. If I bring that down a little bit, I like the details that I put up here on that bulbous organ hanging out. So I think I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to lightly put in an indication of maybe some lines or strange, I guess, stepping scales as it moves across that rounded area. The other thing that's going to be adding realism is that I need to establish what that form is doing. And by doing so, the lines that I'm adding across here are actually helping me a lot, because I'm running them across that surface and it's rounded. So I'm just arching or arcing the lines right here, but I'm making sure that I'm following the direction of the shape. Once you do something like that, then it starts to establish what the shape is actually doing. And here's the other fun part. This rounded part right here in the center of that shoulder, it's going to be the closest to us. So I'm just going to start dark, and I'm just going to fade that off. Start dark, fade it off, start dark, like this. So now all of a sudden it's going to look like it's coming at us. And then I can start to darken on the sides of that joint right here. Now, why am I darkening the side of the joint? It's because not only is it a rounded shape, so we're thinking about putting value on a sphere and a cylinder, anything rounded. The light source right here, I established it already with that arrow coming straight down. So that means that the underbelly of this is going to get the least amount of light. There's going to be a core shadow there. And I can start to bleed off some heavier graphite across that strange eye area that I accidentally turned into wasp eyes. But because it's light, I can kind of put some value over that and fix that problem, because I did not want that to become an eyeball. But that doesn't suggest that I can't use that as something cool later. Now, another happy accident that just happened that I didn't plan on. It looks like I added in some muscle for one of these teeth. Or I guess you can, think about the predator's mouth. Those of you that are familiar with Predator, I don't know how you couldn't be. You have those four large mandibles coming out, but the mandibles on the upper part of Predator's mouth have some muscle and it goes up into the head. So what if we did that? And it showed by just darkening the underside of that tendon, I guess you can call it. And then maybe a little bit on that bottom jaw part. So now we're starting to really establish some form. This is getting fun. I wouldn't be able to show you any of this had I not first done the outline with the sphere, the rounded shapes, and then put in that very, very light coating of graphite in the very beginning of the sketch. This is why layering is so important, because now what I can do is I can just kind of bring my pencil back here, go over it very lightly, just put in an extra coating to make sure things are smooth, and then I can start adding in some more detail. So I like how the shading kind of runs off of this joint, the shoulder joint. So what I'll do is I'll just put maybe a shadow that goes straight down. It's a little darker. Now, why would I be putting in a shadow that goes straight down? Think about the ambient lighting, the diffused lighting that I have established for the atmosphere. It's going straight down so that everything down here is in shadow because it's on the under part of the face. And then I'm just going to kind of bleed off that shadow as it goes into the rest of the head. Now, I do like this forehead area. I like that a lot. So I'm going to darken this just so you can see it a little easier, so I can see it easier. I'm the one drawing it. And then right up here at those top teeth, and I can put in some other structures to make it look like the teeth have like underlying muscles and roots and everything, and they're going up into the skull. This part right here is rounded, so I'm just going to put in some more values and then fade it off into the forehead. There we go. Now that's looking kind of cool. When I'm looking at this now, I'm starting to get the sense that I'm kind of losing some of the details. So when we look up here, the carphanoid's head, I don't know, it might be a little too blurry. I'll move that down a little bit. When you look at the carphanoid's head, look at all those areas that are like jet black. Okay, that's what I'm going to eventually do on this face right here. But I need to figure out what areas that I want black, because there's a lot more structural changes in this skull and this head than there will be in this one. This one's pretty round. This one's pretty complicated. It's got roundness. It has square jaws. It has things coming off of the bottom jaw, the nose. I mean, you name it. It's got it. So I want to be careful. So for this, I think what I'll do is I will play up these strange gills, I guess you can call them, on that shoulder joint, and really play that up. I like that. And then maybe get a little darker with the arm. Okay, and the reason I'm getting darker just now in the back of that joint is because the value right next to it, so where my pencil is pointing to, that value is light. This is going to be dark, and it adds a really nice contrast with it. So this obviously sticks out more than this now. So that when I go back to this area and I put in some more shading, no matter what I do to this area from now on, I don't want to make it any darker than this. So now I have that to kind of gauge what I want to do. I also kind of, I bounce around my sketches a lot too. I'll get excited about one area and then I'll just start to put in some details for another one. And then all of a sudden I started to put more details in an area that I didn't know could be looking cool. So I'll just keep at it. Now I'm really starting to like where these shapes are going. I'm doing a little circular motions now. Really tiny little circular motions. I'm not going straight across. Just really tiny little circular motions. Why am I doing circular motions? I've explained this before. It's so that whenever I do a circle, I go back over the previous area. So those of you that know what it feels like to sharpen your pencil and then start to shade, and then you get that really nice little flat part on it, and you want to keep shading in that flat part, when you go back over the previously drawn area, it covers it up nicely. So that's why I do it. So this is going to be a little darker for the wrinkles and such, because that graphite was already pretty dark there. So I want to make sure that there's a lot of contrast and it really pokes outwards. There we go. Okay, so I'm starting to notice that maybe this needs to be darker right up here. So I'm just going to push a little harder in certain little parts. Think about if this does have a crustacean joint and there's like exposed cartilage right there, it's going to be a lot darker right in there because it's like a crack where light definitely isn't getting in. Then I just had this idea to put maybe some bumps or ridges on top of that arm, and then fill those little tiny bumps with small circles of graphite, right like that. Yeah, now it's getting fun. It's just adding structure to areas that I, previously didn't think could have structure. Okay, and now once I have some more structure figured out, I'm going to start to look at some of the effects that I put in this head, and I want to duplicate them here. So I really like the wrinkles that I had done, so I'm just going to indicate maybe where some wrinkles can exist for this creature, connecting it to that part of the jaw. It's not the same creature, so I need to be careful about the whole bone structure in the jaw, what I think is existing underneath it. So maybe that bottom jaw with these crazy hooked teeth. You know what would help? This is totally an experiment. I don't know how this is going to work. I put that sharp one right in front of the tongue, but the back one is going to be behind it. I'm going to curl that up, and now you're talking about something looking deadly. I think there's going to be more of that. I guess you could call it chin spike on the other side. So it's going to fill that gap in right there. I'm going to darken the tongue, because that really, the whole tongue is going to be in shadow. And that did help. That definitely worked. Maybe this curls around. Ooh, that's deadly. It's super thin. Okay, and the other thing, I just want to make sure that there's at least indication of some form on the other side of those teeth. Maybe indicate where the teeth could exist. Maybe it's asymmetrical, so they just kind of grow randomly from the mouth. Put in some black there. Okay, so now we're really starting to add depth. So look how the blackness of that mouth is adding to the creep factor of this thing. Okay, the other thing that I forgot to mention before, when you have a complicated skull like this, it's really good to add the center line, or at least put it in your head that you know where the center line is. I know that the center line is going to run down this rounded shape and then down this part of the lip. Why is that important? It's because whatever I add on this side of the mouth, I'm going to have to foreshorten as I move over there. All of this is going to stay light, but over here needs to be a little darker. Darker as in the individual lines that I'm putting in. So maybe, because I like these lines coming off the mouth and the teeth, so I actually want to do more of that. And now that I look at it, maybe this thing doesn't have teeth. I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of like a crazy, ooh. It's like a demonic Groot almost. There we go. So up here is going to be a little darker because the graphite, or I'm sorry, the layering above it is lighter, and I can put in some more too. Right like this, and just fade it off into the background. This part of that hook can be a little darker. So look how this hook is darker than this one. I will have to get slightly darker with this one because it's kind of, now we're losing it, and I don't want to lose it. So I just want to put all in one direction. I'll walk that graphite over. Okay, so I just got to make sure that this is darker on this side. Now we can see that better. Now it looks like it's part of like smoke or mist or fog or something like that. Okay, so just to get into some other things that I think could benefit would be small dark areas that actually are pretty, or I'm sorry, small areas that could have dark bumps. And what this does is it sits on top of all the graphite that I have put down. This is important. This is going to add in depth as if these things really are on top of the skin. It's all about contrast and about making these things look believable and scary for that matter. It is pretty scary. You also need to think about where they grow. So if I do small tiny imperfections in the skin, or like bearded dragons have these, certain lizards have these, and insects even, they have these little hard knobs that kind of grow out. I mean, look at crustaceans, like crabs, they all have it. But usually crabs they're not dark. It's more of like almost an opaque type look. They grow out from the surface. This is sheerly for protection. All right. So once we have that, now it's really starting to add in some depth also. This part, I'm going to darken. So this is the original bulbous shape that I put on the side that later accidentally turned into eyeballs and that I fixed. Now these weird appendages coming out, those actually will be darker because now the contrast is there. Look at the darkness of those strange antennae coming off, and then the background of it is lighter. So there's a nice contrast. Okay, so you almost have like a 1, 2, 3 effect. You have one being this main appendage coming out. You have two with the second appendage coming out, but if it's slightly lighter because it's in the background. And then three, you actually have the skull in the back. There you go. And I'm going to have to even that out a little bit. So maybe we can put some stretched skin here. Yeah, that's looking cool. Let's give it a gullet too, but not the same shape as the carphanoid. Let's round it off. Okay, so once we do that, I'm going to darken in one direction and just kind of walk my pencil down. I'm keeping all the strokes close together, concentrating hard. One direction like this. I believe the jawline is going to be right there. So that's the back of the jaw. And then I'm just gonna, there's a crevice in here. Think about where the ear would exist and then the jaw. Think about your own face. Okay, you got the jaw in the back and then you have your earlobe, that little area in between. That's a crevice that the least amount of light is touching. So you're gonna want that a little darker. And also, it's a good way to cheat and kind of indicate where a surface ends, and there's like a precipice, not a precipice, that's not a good word for it, crevice. We'll just say crevice. There we go. Okay, so totally unplanned, but now it looks like the texture or the skin for this creature is more leathery, more old wood. It's kind of cool. And then I can just very, very lightly indicate maybe where some neck muscles would be, fade off some very loose gestural shading here. I mean, it's not complete without tiny hairs. So I think I'm just going to add in some tiny hairs. Just really creepy little hairs everywhere. Definitely on the tongue. These are small, thick, small, thick to thin lines done very, very rapidly and quickly. Okay, just like if you're a dude and you recently trimmed your beard all the way down, there's some stubble, it's the same thing. Dark to light, dark to light, dark to light, and they just kind of poke out. Okay, but now I notice there's some sameness going on. It's like a sea of sameness, and that is all of this is the same tone. I don't want that. Remember what I said earlier. This far right arm is going to get the least amount of treatment with shading. So that means that the head needs to be darker. So I'm just going to darken the head and kind of walk some value across it. Now the depth is there. Now the head is popping off, and then this appendage in the back. And kind of a fun technique that I do with my drawings is like the side of it, instead of having a harsh line as if it's definitely outlined and I don't want anything to go past it, I'll just fade off some mist from it. I'll just find gaps that I had not closed before, and I'll just kind of fade it off. So maybe this creature is living in a tropical region or maybe subterranean and just kind of walking through the mist looking for food. There we go. I got this from old painters too. You know, they tended to do this when they had hard lines and soft lines, and they mix them together to add really good depth. Okay, hopefully you liked today's lesson. I really encourage you guys to join our creature design workshop. Discord, look at the description below, check out the link. People are posting and joining every single day, giving tips and such. I just now started a creature design workshop for May. If you want to sign up, or if you want a private mentorship, please join the Discord, DM me, shoot me a message, or you could just email me, bobbyrebholz@gmail.com, whichever you're more comfortable with, and we can talk about it. All right, thanks all. See you later.